Hey guys, welcome back. So for this one, we're continuing our coverage of the Ultimates with issue 9 and getting our introduction to Luke Cage, as well as another person who's supposed to be a hero on this world, whose power is currently being used by someone on the Maker's Council. So with that said, I got the full playlist in the description for anyone who needs to get caught up. And if you're enjoying these videos, do be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so going into this, we're basically being shown another side of what the Maker's done in this universe to get rid of all the superheroes. Because on this world, Earth 6160, he's altered a number of events throughout time to either prevent the different heroes' origins, like what we saw with him taking the radioactive spider that should have bitten the teenage Peter Parker, to prevent him from becoming Spider-Man. And in other cases, he just outright had the heroes killed, like what we saw with this world's version of the Fantastic Four. And the Maker's method of controlling the world throughout history, it's basically been the same, with him manipulating events to gain power, and then assign different individuals who, in most cases would have been villains anyway, to oversee that power in different territories across the world. And one of those individuals we came across in issue 2 is an individual who's taken the Mark I suit of Howard Stark, who goes by the name of Midas. And we covered his story more in depth back when we talked about issue 2. And I have all the links in the description for anyone who needs to go back or get caught up, but all you really need to know for right now is that he made a deal with the Maker, which allowed Midas to take over the White House after JFK was assassinated in 1963. And as a part of the Maker's New World Order, this also placed Midas in control of the prison system. And to be clear, this didn't make Midas a member of the Maker's Council, which is like the Illuminati on this world. But instead, the situation with Midas, it's more similar to what we've seen with Kingpin, who's also not on the Maker's Council, but he answers to them and the Maker, or at least he's supposed to. But basically, all of this has been set in place on Earth 6160 up until recently, when Tony Stark assembled the Ultimates and made it his mission to fix the world and restore the different heroes who had their powers taken so they could help with the cause. And so this time around, we follow how that story crosses paths with Luke Cage, as well as another guy who was robbed of being the hero that he was supposed to be. And so to start this out, we pick up with a young Luke Cage, 20 years ago, in 2005, when he was just 15 years old. He was taken to prison and told that he was facing 1 year to life, and given absolutely no explanation of what it was for. And the guy telling him this doesn't know either. He just lets Luke know that it was an administrative trial, and he doesn't have any of the details because he's not a lawyer. So of course, with the young Luke being confused and terrified, he has no clue what's going on. So this guy just tells him, look, I don't want to get into a whole discussion about it, okay? I'm just here to tell you what's happening. Carl Lucas, Luke Cage, you're going away for a while. Don't look so glum. It's just 1 year. You'll be out before you know it. And that's when the story jumps forward 20 years, bringing us to the present, where we see Luke being transferred to Gordium Correctional Facility. And at this point in the present, February of 2025, there's a few things I want to point out here, because we're going to revisit moments in Luke's life and see what's happened over the past 20 years leading up to now, and most of those moments land in February, so it's a bit of Luke Cage Black history. But nonetheless, there's a few things I want to point out here because we're going to come back to this. But before we catch up on his past, I want you guys to notice how when Luke's transferred to this prison, in the background, there's this lady on the screen giving this whole welcome home message, and it's basically just saying once you're at this prison, you have no rights of any kind. She explains the rules, which are pretty much just obey the guards and stay out of trouble. And at one point, she even says that Midas is proud to keep costs down and our community safe, which again just goes back to how this whole system leads back to the Maker and the narrative that he wanted people to believe as far as what these correctional facilities stood for. But also with Luke coming here in February 2025, there are whispers between the guards about how at other prisons the inmates have taken over. So they're trying to keep it quiet so that these inmates don't get any ideas. And we'll learn more about what's happening at those other prisons in a little bit. But before we do, first I want to get into the part that covers Luke's history, that picks up from February of 2006 and takes us all the way up to where Luke was transferred to the prison he's currently at now. Because by February of 2006, Luke had already served 1 year at Seagate Penitentiary, and that's when he learned early on that the prison life was rough, the guards would often beat the inmates, and given no choice but to be here, Luke began to build up his body. And when we jump from 06 to February of 2010, with Luke who's still at Seagate, and over the years the guards haven't changed, they're still beating up prisoners. But at this time with Luke, we learned that he's not only built up his body, and continued to do so, but he's also reading books and building up his mind. And when we head from 2010 to February of 2014, where Luke is still serving time at Seagate, but it's at this point where we're shown that he's accused of starting a prison gang, when the truth is it was actually a reading group. But nonetheless, the guards tell him, you're a troublemaker, a dangerous element, it's in your file. It's been in your file since you were born. Which for these guards, it's the programming that they were taught, like we learned from Nick Fury in Ultimate Universe 1 year in. Because in this world, from the top all the way down, the makers set systems in place to tell people who and what to hate. They place chemicals in the food to make people more susceptible to influence. So for people like these guards, a lot has gone into making them the type of people who just believe what they're told. So for someone like Luke, who's supposed to be a hero, who's supposed to be Power Man, his file, which was made by the maker, it's always labeled him a threat. And these guards have been heavily conditioned to just believe what they've been told. But even with that being the case, there's still an element here of people being who they are. Because at one point, one of these guards is like, they enjoy what they're doing. And it's kind of like, whoa, hey, that wasn't in the programming. So it's not like brainwashing, it's just influence. But even now with Luke taking this beating back in February of 2014, the other inmates see this, and I want you guys to keep that in mind, because after this, when we jump forward to January of 2024, almost 10 years later exactly, with Luke still serving time at Seagate, and we get a look here at some of the other inmates talking about him, where one of them's like, how many times does that make in the infirmary for Cage since he got here? And really, these guys can't even keep count. And one of them even says Luke must have broken every bone in his body a dozen times now. They say he's unbreakable. But also with this being January of 2024, in the Ultimates universe, Earth 6160, we already know what time it is, because it's here where Luke receives his message from Tony Stark, which says, Cage, Luke Cage, this is for you. And it goes through the message in a similar way to what we saw with Peter in Ultimate Spider-Man. Though in this case, it's more summarized and specific to the powers that Luke Cage is having restored. And the parts that we get are just Tony saying ionic catalyst, that will allow you to gain unbreakable skin and unbelievable strength, which from there cuts in and out to him getting the explanation of the world being controlled, just before it jumps to Tony's proposal of them freeing the world together. But effectively, it's right here in January of 2024, basically 1 year ago, where Luke Cage got his powers restored for the first time. And so of course, after Luke gets his powers, he does his signature punch through the wall, and he basically goes God of War on this prison. And I mean, not exactly, because Luke Cage had the chains long before Kratos. But what he ends up doing here is giving the prisoners control over the prison, while saying all power to the people. And 5 months later, in June of 2024, this is when Tony Stark came through to recruit Luke and bring him into the Ultimates network, with Luke being one of the successful attempts of giving the different heroes the power that was supposed to be theirs on this world. But at this time in June of 2024, Luke didn't go with Tony, but instead he told Tony that he's able to do more good on the inside than out, which is what then led to Luke transferring to New Brunswick Correctional Facility, where he empowered the prisoners to take over there as well. So now, coming back to 2025 for the rest of this, the New Brunswick riot is what the guards were whispering about when we saw Luke getting transferred to his current prison, Gordium Correctional Facility. Because in the previous two prisons, they're trying to keep it on the hush-hush as far as the truth about prisoners taking over. And I imagine Luke wants it that way, at least at first, so that he's able to pass from one prison to the next and continue to help these other inmates. And as soon as he gets here in February of 2025, there's a moment where he stops another inmate from getting stabbed. So they introduce themselves to one another shortly after. And as it turns out, the dude who almost got stabbed is Danny Rand, the guy who's supposed to be the immortal Iron Fist, instead of Hulk. And for a moment, Danny's like, do I know you from somewhere? You ever do time in Seagate? Which of course Luke did, but he just tells Danny that he's done time all over. And I gotta say, seeing Danny in here while the Hulk is currently the immortal Iron Fist, and now this has me wanting to see a story where Danny gets it back. And I'm sure that's something that's much more easier said than done, but just think how crazy that would be. And I mean, as of right now, there's absolutely no indication of that happening. And I'm not even saying that there's any likeliness of the story even going in that direction. Just saying I'd be here for it. But after introducing themselves to one another, Luke asks Danny what that was all about. And Danny tells him, honestly, I have no idea. In this place, it's easy to offend someone without meaning to or even knowing. And Danny tells him, like, listen, man, thanks for the help, but word of advice from someone who's been here a while. Mind your own business and watch your own back, because no one's gonna watch it for you. And Luke just tells him, nah, not my style. And so later on, and still in the month of February of 2025, because we're done with the time jumps for now, But over the following days, we go back and forth from a conversation with Luke and Danny while they're playing chess. And over time, this conversation is joined by other inmates who just pull up a seat and hear what Luke's got to say. And I call it a conversation, but really it's Luke explaining to Danny and eventually others the truth about what's happening here is modern slavery, which eventually leads to what they're going to do about it. But on the other hand, this goes back and forth with us seeing Luke participating in the worker employment program that was put in place a long time ago by Midas. Because for the time being, Luke, he's just trying to blend in, but also there's a portion of this that's contributing to the takeover plan. But over the course of these days, he tells Danny and the others, what's happening here is modern day slavery, nothing less. Slavery is a social death. It is to be forever cut off from your context and community. It is to have never been born. They have made us into non-people explicitly. They say it's about justice. They say it's about the law. It's not about any of that. And that's when Danny asks him, so what's it all about? And Luke tells him, it's about power, man. And he goes on to say there are no good pigs. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or what god you worship. The only distinction that matters in here is the distinction between the pigs and the prisoners, the guards and the inmates, us and them. These guards are our only enemies here. Our most immediate struggle is with them, and through them, the unjust system they uphold. We struggle for nothing more and nothing less than control over our own lives. If we are to succeed in our struggle, you have to fight for the life of the man next to you as if it were your own, which it is. Because, believe me, if they come for him one morning, they'll be coming for you that night. The people, whether inside these walls or outside, have no control over their lives. But we can take control, first of this facility, and then our future. The only difference between the inside and the outside is one of maximum security and minimum. And as Luke is explaining this whole thing, once again, the group is getting larger. And as the days go by, in private, he tells them the real plan as far as how they're going to take over the prison. But to continue the speech portion, Luke goes on to say the system cannot stand. The world can no longer afford it. It never could. It cannot be reformed. The system resists reform, but must be transformed. In the revolutionary sense, we must take power back for the people, many of whom will at first be afraid of us. And that's okay. We're going to scare them, not to death, but to life. And when we get here, we learn the whole time that Luke was doing the worker employment program, him and the other inmates were hiding weapons away, leading all the way up to the takeover. And so the next day, which is takeover day, the first thing we see is Luke and 4 other inmates in chains, with the guards saying that they caught them working on a prison break. And it's here where, like I mentioned earlier about the guards being subject to the influence, where it's like, okay, the instructions came from the maker and trickled all the way down. But at the same time, with them lining Luke up with the others here and getting ready to execute them, it's part of the policy that was set in place by Midas that they use lethal force. But one of these guards, he's just open about it, because he's like, I'm not ashamed to say, I love my job. Which goes back to what I was saying before, like these guys aren't brainwashed. So it's not like anyone's making him enjoy this. And on this earth, maker or no maker, this guy would have been a bad person anyway. So I just want to put that out there. But following this, when the guards opened fire, the other 4 who were chained to Luke, they just ducked down because they ain't trying to get shot. But as expected, the bullets just bounce off of Luke. He flexes his muscles and the chains just break off of him as he tells the other inmates to follow the plan. And you know, I'm not really sure if the whole part where he had the other guys chained up with him and getting shot at, I'm not sure if that was part of the plan, because if it was, that's kind of messed up. But this just leads to Luke also taking over this prison while continuing to say all power to the people, which now is effectively giving us Luke Cage as our ultimate power man. And I'm not sure if he'll go by Ultimate Power Man or Ultimate Luke Cage. I think either one works. But yeah, this now currently has the Ultimate Universe Luke Cage taking over Gordium Correctional Facility with Danny Rand right there by his side. And after seeing this, the next thing we do is head over to the Triskelion satellite. And this is still taking place in February of 2025. So again, no more crazy time jumps for now. But it's here where we see She-Hulk talking to Tony Stark, who's still in the container that Doom placed him in after Tony was crushed by the Hulk. And mainly because before, she wanted to go back to her home island, but Doom told her that she can't. Because if she does, the Maker's Council will get a hold of her, they'll probe her brain and find out what the Ultimates are and basically kill everybody. And that's why she's more or less stuck here. But she goes on to say here, Doom says that you cannot hear me, that I only waste my breath. But there is no one else to talk to, and Doom doesn't know everything. I wanted to tell you, whatever you're feeling, Tony, whatever pain, whatever torment, whatever desire to escape, stay strong. It will pass. I know when I began my transformation, I spent weeks listening to my bones break and reform, my flesh tear itself apart and grow back, again and again. I threw up my own lungs, felt new organs grow and rearrange themselves inside me. My belly was a pit of snakes in agony. I know pain. I know fear. I know that part of you wishes to give up. There was a part of me too. But you cannot, Tony. What brought me back was a promise. I must return to my people, Tony. They need me, and I need you. This is why you cannot die. Do you understand? You made me a promise. You made us all a promise. And I know that you will keep it. And after saying this, when she walks away, just moments later, we see Tony's eye open. And it's like, oh, he's alive. And now with just 9 months remaining until the Maker's return, I'm really eager to see what Tony's new plan is going to be. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.